Basically, I put this up as people come in because it illustrates the city of Greater Sudbury. All the towns, including the former city of Sudbury, were amalgamated in 2001. All of these towns are still very much alive and vibrant as communities within the greater city. In the last 18 years, ward boundaries have changed a couple of times, but the towns remain clearly entrenched in the hearts, minds, and everyday lives of the people as distinct communities. And I apologize for reading, but I don't want to miss any key points, okay? Where we are and where we're heading in the future, you have to understand what the functional reality of municipalities is. Municipal corporation is very similar to a public corporation in that the voters and shareholders are the owners. The council and board of directors are the elected members, and management is hired in both cases, and frontline workers are also hired in both cases. The one exception to stewardship, and the stewardship is quite good, but the one exception to how good stewardship is the voter participation. The last election saw only 45% voter turnout. Now, Mr. Leduc has correctly pointed out that that may only be partially due to the voters. It may also be due to the election process that was used. Either case, the voters weren't there. So it's something that our group wants to address. And we're working to change that so that the next election we have a far higher than 45% turnout. So that brings us to the mission of our city, or our towns and our city. And this says it pretty succinctly, is to increase voter shareholder engagement in the managing of our towns and city towards achieving a sustainable level of social and economic factors. We can't develop economics without considering the social impact, and we can't develop social amenities without having the economic base to support them. In order to take a look at that, you have to look back in order to move forward. How did we get here? Because if you don't look at how we got here, how do you know what to do different? We need to take a look at what has been done wrong, not necessarily wrong even, what has been done that didn't work. Okay? So if we also continue to look back, 1999 dollar figures have all been escalated to 2017 and compared to 2017. The big difference has been in elected representatives. There was an 81% decrease. The cost of the elected representatives dropped from 2.8 million down to 700,000. The population has remained pretty constant. Full-time employment or employees at the city have increased by 17%. The budget has remained relatively constant, and the property tax levy has gone from 189 million up to 249 million, or a 32% increase. It's important, though, to recognize why that 32% increase occurred. In 2010-2011, the provincial government took $60 million of the grants to the city of Greater Sudbury. What has happened since then is the property tax levy has had to keep increasing to get back to that same level of spending coverage, if you will. Instead of looking for economies to stay in this range, councils of the day instead increased their budgets to make it up. Okay? Long-term debt has increased by 258%. The big one is deferred infrastructure. In 1999, expressed in 2017 dollars, the infrastructure deficit was 61 million. In 2017, it was 1.9 billion. 3,000% increase in the amount of infrastructure work that is getting deferred. Stuff that we're going to have to pay for one of these days, but right now we're putting it on the back burner and doing other things instead. The infrastructure deficit per year is running about 60 million. an increase from the 8.8 that was occurring in 1999. That 60 million is in addition to escalation. This all comes from the Hempson report. Their numbers indicate very clearly, if you go through their report, very clearly that we're increasing at the rate of $60 million of infrastructure decay that needs to be fixed and isn't getting fixed, over and above any escalation factors. So that gives you a quick picture of where we're at. The 1999 budget was 330 million, but escalated, that comes up to 637. And that's what I've done under the 1999 numbers are escalated to that. These numbers are all pulled from the City of Greater Sudbury and the Government of Canada StatsCan data. So there's nothing made up. I haven't calculated anything aside from putting the numbers down. How did this all come about? Well, we had what was called the Thomas Report in 1999 that recommended amalgamation. And on January 1st, 2001, the province passed the City of Greater Sudbury Act that amalgamated all of those communities you saw at the beginning into the Greater City of Sudbury. That included all of the 6 towns plus the City of Sudbury. None of those towns or the old City of Sudbury exist anymore in a political sense. But as I explained at the beginning, they all exist very vividly in the minds of everybody living in those communities. Of the objectives, and these are the promised benefits of amalgamation that were in the Thomas Report. This is why they went ahead with amalgamation. Of all the promises, the only one that was achieved was the reduction in the number of elected representatives. In 2001, City Council initiated a boundary review, and they established a citizens committee to do that. They came back, and in 2002 they reported that there should be 12 single councillor wards instead of the 6 double councillor wards, not awards. That the boundaries should get reviewed every second election, population balance between the wards, and an urban-rural balance within each ward, and effective representation. The only ones of that happened were the 2 in red. In 2002, Council decided to go ahead with those ward changes. So the election in 2006 was based on the 12 wards instead of 6. Now, it may seem a little weird that within a year of amalgamation with the new wards, they reviewed the wards and said they were no good and changed them. Well, you're right, it's weird. They didn't even have a chance to work. 2007, the study that was done by the Constellation City team was actually done in 2006. They studied what was in place from amalgamation and came back with a report in 2007, January 2007, about what to do. And these are the promises that they held if we followed their report. Well, there's been efforts at most of those. None of them have been successful. That's how we got to where we are. So, what did we have? Well, in 2001, this is the ward system that was installed with amalgamation. On here you'll see the former towns all identified with the dark red outlines, and you'll see the ward system that they had, the 6 different wards. Of those 6 different wards, there was only one that did not have a rural component, and it was Ward 6. All the other wards had rural and urban components. In 2006, based on the study in 2002, those wards got changed, and we ended up with 12 wards, okay, and that's the town distribution that was there. And now there are 5 wards that have no rural component, and 7 that do have a rural component. So that was brought in 2007 was the first year of the 12-board structure. Where are we headed now, moving forward? What's ahead of us? Well, we have major cost projects ahead of us. We have the Kingsway Entertainment District at $100 million. We have the junction at $125 million. In order to do the junction, we have to retire an asset worth $50 million. In retiring that asset, we are literally flushing $50 million down the drain. It's going to be gone. There will be no recovery of it. Parking, well, they say that's going to cost us at least $3 million to compensate for some of the parking losses in these other projects. Cost des Arts is tabled at $30 million. Keep in mind that these aren't all on your property tax, but these are all costs to everybody in the city. Because whether it comes federal, provincial, or municipal, we all end up paying for it. In addition to those, we have a lot of deferred infrastructure ahead of us. Fire services, you heard in 2017, was priced at $90 million. That appears to have stopped, however, not necessarily, and a little anomaly about that. In the 2019 budget, there is no money for volunteer firemen. There are no volunteer firemen listed in the 2019 budget. I don't know yet what the city is going to do about our volunteers. It's not clear in the budget. I haven't found any write-up on it, but there are no volunteer firemen allowed in that budget. Roads and road depots, we had heard a presentation just a while back of some $100 million for that. Police headquarters, I think the latest number on that is $65 million. Water, wastewater, we have studies on water, wastewater worth over $400 million. Asset management, I think the number is around $100 million. These are buildings. So our deferred infrastructure, again, from the Hempson report, in 2017 was $1.9 billion. This year, it's up to $2.1 billion. And by 2026, they're projecting it will be $3.1 billion. If you add those together with these, we have $2.4 billion ahead of us before interest. And if you say, okay, let's take a look at that, let's just say that all of these projects went this year. 30-year loan, borrowing, at a 4.7% interest, which is a reasonable interest. The total cost of all this will be $4.4 billion. That's a big number for our small population. The impact on taxpayers would be an increase in property taxes from, if you're paying $3,000 a year right now, that would climb to $4,650, a 40-some% increase in your property tax. That is a reality if something isn't done to change things. And right now, I don't see anything in the 2019 budget that will change anything. Where are we as far as being able to support all this money? Well, we have a changing demographics in this city. The blue line was the 2011 census by Census Canada or Statistics Canada. The green line was the same census in 2016, and the red line is the 2020 projection or extrapolation from those two other previous ones. What does it mean? Well, first of all, we have to recognize from 40-year-olds to 65-year-old cohort, those are the peak income years for any worker. Those are when you're at the top of your income scale. That's when you can afford disposable income projects. It's when you can afford higher taxes. So, back in 2011 census, we had this group of people from 0 to 20 years old. We were already suffering a bit of a vacuum in that bubble of 40 to 65-year-olds. And we had a group of 65 to 85-year-olds like this. The 2016 census showed us that this number was declining. This vacuum grew considerably, and the number of 65 to 85-year-olds grew considerably. In fact, the 65 to 85-year-olds grew by some 45%, 42%, sorry. Then, if you extrapolate that forward to 2020, this curve doesn't pull back up. This vacuum of high income earners gets even larger, and the 65 to 85-year-olds gets even larger as well. These people are on fixed income or income indexed to cost of living. These people will have minimal earning power compared to the 40 to 65-year-olds, and we're losing that huge group of high income earners. That isn't just from Census Canada. There are all kinds of projections out there from other groups, other organizations that are forecasting the same thing. So what's going to happen to our tax base? Well, it's going to disappear. So, again, moving forward, let's take a look at how we're structured. In normal business, corporate models, you have a corporate office, and usually your key administration functions are married in with the corporate office. And if you take, for an example, someone like Valet or Glencore, they have their corporate office somewhere else. They have their key administration somewhere else. But their independent operations, their autonomous operations, are where the work is. They have a manager. For example, Valet has a manager at the nickel refinery. They have a manager at the back mine. They have a manager at the smelter. Those are largely autonomous. Okay? They function due to the conditions that are right for that operation. That's the way it's efficient. To prove that it's efficient, the Government of Canada does the same thing. They have the corporate office in Ottawa and most of their key administration, but they have provinces which are autonomous. The province of Ontario does the same thing. They have Toronto, but then they have Sudbury, Oshawa, Peterborough, London. They do the same thing. The only aberration from that model is our city. And at our city, we try to run everything from the corporate office. So we have to wonder, why wouldn't we go for a more efficient model? Corporations, businesses, federal, provincial government all decentralize their services to where the users are. And a simple example of that is Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons didn't build a big coffee shop in Sudbury and ask everybody from Chelmsford and other outlying areas to come to their coffee shop. They put autonomous coffee shops out where the customers were. City of Greater Sudbury, because of our One City, One Service policy, centralizes those services in one spot. Are there alternatives? Darn right there are. Monk's School of Global Affairs, which is a part of the University of Toronto, their Institute of Municipal Finance and Governance in 2012 did a study to find out what the economics of being bigger are. When you agglomerate or when you amalgamate, how does that affect the economics of your community? And one of the things they found is that there's a cost per capita curve that looks like that blue line. The maximum efficiency, or the lowest cost per capita, happens at a population of about 30,000. It comes back up as your population decreases, and it goes up dramatically as your population increases. Right now, City of Greater Sudbury is sitting at about that level, the red line, $3,335 per capita, operating per year. If you applied these size communities to what we have as the old towns, the operating costs of those towns could be expected to drop down to this level, which is about $2,700 per capita. That per capita drop in cost would be implied on 45% of our population. that would approach $30 million in savings per year for the greater city. That 40 to 30 million per year is equivalent to a 12% reduction in property tax. Surely we need to take a look at that. This is just one alternative though. There are many other alternatives. An alternative used in British Columbia and many parts of the States use what they call integrated, intermunicipal integration or cooperation, where if Walden had a good fire response system, and Chelmsford wanted to save money, they said, okay, well, we'll pay you to use your fire response system and apply it in our community on a contract basis. They can maximize the economies like that. And this is being done in several hundred communities across the continent. They are getting the savings. So we need to take a look at that. So, where are we? Well, these are our towns and our city. We're all in it together, regardless of whether you live in the center core, or whether you live out in the back, or whether you live in Coniston. We're all in it together, all 161,000 of us. Our group, our towns, our city, we're not about the amalgamation. We don't see de-amalgamation as a feasible option, but we do believe that there are economies to be gained in taking a look at how we run the city. Can we be more like a McDonald's or Tim Hortons, and we put the operations appropriate to the location at the location? They can still report to City Hall, but you put them out where they're responsive to the public in that area. Can you contract back and forth? These are all alternatives and options. And for these reasons, our towns, our city is wholly and completely supportive of Councillor Vagnini's motion to take a look at the alternatives. There's $30 million on the table here. We need to be looking at that $30 million, especially when you consider what was in that slide where all the money we got ahead of us. We need to save the $30 million if we're going to do any of that. Even to do the infrastructure, we need to save the $30 million. Is it 30 million or is it 20 million? We don't know until somebody takes a serious look at it and quantifies it. We don't know what it is. But we do believe it needs to be looked at. So that ends the very short version of the story.